words. I couldn't remember the quote, but thanks for reminding me that. Thanks for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk. And also thank you for being here and listening to what I have to say. I have a couple of take-home messages. But before doing that, there's a couple of other things that I would like to share with you. One of the things that I'm doing sort of on the side is I'm the European co-chair of the International Metropolis Network, which is, or at least pretends to be a global network, bringing together expertise from the field of international migration, international immigration, urban development. And I have to admit we are strongest in North America and in Europe, less so in Asia or Australia and New Zealand. But the idea is to bring together expertise both from the academic community, from the policy community, and from civic societies. And what we really would like to accomplish is to share academic knowledge with the ones who are in a position to use it, and on the other hand to provide knowledge to the users so that they can develop their policies based on facts. I know that's very old-fashioned, that's pre-Trump or pre-Brexit, but that's nonetheless what we want to accomplish. Every year there's a big conference, and the next one will take place in the city of The Hague, which is almost around the corner from here, mid-September. I would like to invite you to go to the website. That is to write the address of the website, because the website will be launched within a few weeks. But there's already a page where you can sign up and get information about the events. Well, in the line of that, I would also like to draw your attention to the Facebook page that Metropolis has. If you're really interested in international migration, the root causes in the further development of integration, in the nexus of integration, migration and cities, then I recommend you to sign up. Every day there are 20, 30, sometimes 40 messages. If you're not interested, you just ignore them. But personally, I find a lot of them quite interesting. But I have to admit that I'm not an objective observer, because I'm one of the posters here. Okay, my take-home lessons. I will elaborate on them, but actually I have a couple of them. First of all, that economic development, urban economic development and migration have always been linked in multiple ways. I will come back to that in a minute to further explain it. Secondly, I would like to problematize what I would call ethnic groupthink, the taking for granted assumption that immigrants constitute ethnic groups and that determines the way they move around in the city and their opportunities. And I think it's much more complex than that. Thirdly, to put cities or the urban context center stage. It's very important to acknowledge how, say, the urban environment structures opportunities, but also how individuals influence the development of the opportunity structure. And finally, I would like to say a bit about the mixed blessing of creative economies. I come from the University of Amsterdam, and in Amsterdam everybody is very full of the creative sector, the cultural industries, and so on and so forth, and rightly so, because a lot is happening there. And in Amsterdam they also keep a keen eye on what's happening in Berlin, because Berlin is seen as a similar kind of place, or London or Barcelona. You cannot take it for granted that these new economic developments are also open in the same way as they're open to, say, native indigenous individuals, as you're open to migrants. And so I want to share with you a bit about the mixed blessings, and then we enter Hipsterland indeed, and I will come back to that later. Well, as said, each, say, economic period is connected to migration. And I can explain it very simply. So 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was still in the heydays of the Fordist economy. Industrial centers, as we had in Germany or in the Netherlands or in France or in Sweden, were in need of, especially the manufacturing industry, were in need of low-skilled, poorly skilled workers. And there they came in the form of a guest worker center of migration. Well, that migration doesn't exist anymore, partly because those types of industries are no longer there. And the industries that are now very prominent in the same areas are service industries, industries with a high symbolic level, industries that deal with the production, circulation and consumption of knowledge, of information, including products with a high symbolic level, high symbolic value. It's what Alan Scott would call the cultural creative industries. They are the new industries, but those industries need a different type of workers. They're not in need of poorly skilled or low skilled workers. They are in need of highly skilled workers, and especially the ones who are more entrepreneurial and who have a sort of a cool attitude. And here too, you see that because of those industries, a lot of people move around the globe. And there are even people who move around specifically for that reason. Not so much with the intention to migrate for the rest of their life, but to spend a few years in another country. I have a PhD student, she's particularly interested in that. And she says, well, these people, young people, highly educated, they want to go to Amsterdam or to London or to Paris. They don't want to go to Liège. They don't want to go to vague area, say Gdansk in Poland. They want to go to cool places where they can be immersed in cool activities, and they all dream about a career or an entrepreneurial opportunity in the creative sectors. Very often they are not very successful. I mean, they do find places, they do find activities, but it's not enough to survive over a long period. And many of them end up at coffee bars and become a barista, which in their view is still a cool opportunity. My point is that it's a different type of migration that we are now observing. Well, this to some extent is also reflected in the sociological thinking about migration. 40, 50 years ago, in the heydays of guest worker migration, the more Marxist type of theories were very popular. And it paid a lot of attention to the class position of the workers, about a lot of interest in their socio-economic development. There was a discussion about class, about underclasses, about sub-proletariats, or whatever they were called. And for obscure reasons, that thinking sort of disappeared. Well, obscure in the sense, after the fall of the wall here and the collapse of the Soviet Empire, quite a few colleagues of us thought, well, that's the end of Marxism, as if economic developments would not matter. What you saw instead was a different kind of thinking, a different kind of politics. Identity politics came to the fore. And well, in many European countries, and certainly in North America, what I would call ethnic group thinking came to the fore. And that immigrants were immediately defined as ethnic minority groups. People would have a different way of doing things, different identity. And I'm not denying that that is the case, but the assumption is that that determines anything they do in their life. So if they underperform, underachieve in the educational system, it's because of that. If they can't find a job, it's because of that. I've done a lot of work in the field of entrepreneurship. Well, the label is immediately ethnic entrepreneurship. And the assumption is that these entrepreneurs, these bakers, these owners of supermarkets or whatever business, that they operate their business in a way different from the mainstream. And that is something that I don't believe. And I can show that it's much more complex. And one of the ways in which I can show it is by pointing to the garment industry. You know, garments, clothing production. Clothing production was omnipresent in many countries. I don't know to what extent you know anything about clothing production. Lots of things can be automatized, but not so much the assembling. So the sewing of the different elements, that is very often done by hand, partly because the fabrics are difficult to handle. And that means that the cost of clothing production is to a large extent related to the cost of the salaries. And because of that, a lot of the bigger clothing production sites relocated from Amsterdam, from London, from Paris to low-wage countries. But what you saw in the 1980s is sort of or as of the 98, a return of some parts of that construction. Not so much in the form of big plants, big, say, clothing production sites, but in the form of small production sites, or small, what's also called small sweatshops, very often run by immigrants. They produce clothing at the lower end of the market, and because of their sort of small scale, they could very quickly respond to changes in the market. So the taste of the of the clients has changed. So when I was a kid, and I'm talking about the previous millennium, but when I was a kid, there were two seasons. There was a summer season and a winter season, and that's it. And nowadays, the seasons, but also the different styles of clothing, they can change every few weeks, and that means that it's more difficult for sellers to have the right stuff in stock, and it also means that there's a desperate need for production at a very short notice. So now it's sunny, well it's December so it's cold, but let's say in May it's sunny, the weather forecast next week it will be even more sunny and warm, and what's popular is say shorts with flower prints. You need to have them now. If the weather forecast is rain, you don't need it. So you order them quickly, and you cannot order them from Bangladesh or the Philippines. That takes too much time. So you order them around the corner. And this is a market in which a lot of these immigrant enterprises emerged. And that happened happened in Amsterdam. Then there were a couple of things, especially Turks in Amsterdam were very much involved in it. About 2/3 of the businesses were owned by Turks. There were some 20,000 individuals involved in various capacities. It was highly informal. The taxes were not paid, all sorts of rules were violated, but there was not a lot of governmental control, so the entrepreneur thought, well, maybe it's illegal, but nobody says anything, so we treat it as legal. And in the early 1990s, the government decided to change that. And they said, well, we need to crack down on all those informal practices. And they did it because there were discussions about changing the welfare state. The Labour Party didn't want those changes, so they said, well, let's first get rid of informal practices and illegal use and abuse of welfare arrangements. So it was decided to crack down on informal work, and the garment sector immediately came to the fore as one of the sectors. So that is a change in the regulatory structure. At more or less the same time, new production markets emerged. Poland, Bulgaria. It was easy to outsource the production of clothing from, let's say, from Russia to Amsterdam. It's only 8 hours by truck, so there's no big deal. And with the emergence of new markets, the competition for the Amsterdam-based sweatshops became very serious. And the competition was already cutthroat, because a lot of these Turks, we know they are very much involved in all sorts of networks. They were looking at each other, and they forgot to look at the market. They forgot to look at the changing regulatory structure. They forgot to look at the changing market conditions. So they really got into trouble. At some point, there were attempts by organizations of Turkish garment producers to lobby the government to change their policy. So they said, okay, it's true that there's a lot of informal activity going on, but we can deal with that in different ways. We can organize training sites, we can organize mediation so that the unemployed find their way to these workshops. The government, however, decided to police it and to solve the issue in that way. What it shows is that these Turks, about two things. First of all, that many of the Turks were very much involved in Turkish networks, which in the literature is often seen as very positive, but it also shows that partly because of those networks, they were involved in cutthroat competition. So it's not just solidarity, it's also exploitation. And thirdly, that their networks were totally irrelevant when it came to lobbying the government. So why am I saying this actually? Well, partly because I studied it, but most of all to let you know that there is never a one-to-one relationship between, say, ethnic loyalty, ethnic networks, and economic success. It's much more complicated than that, and that we need to bring the political economy into the analysis. Another example is related to this, or actually about the disappearance of this. So what we see in many, what am I doing in terms of time? There's no idea. Now, I'm good at many things, but not good in keeping time. Another 5 minutes. Okay. That, so in Amsterdam, but you can find these neighborhoods in many cities. They were working class neighborhoods. They were working class because they have a large composition of social houses. The social houses provided jobs provided housing for working class people who worked in the the manufacturing industries. The manufacturing industries disappeared as of the 1970s, and so did many of the native Dutch workers. And they moved out to the suburbs, because in the 1960s, 70s, the cities were very unpopular. So those who could leave the city left the city, and their places were filled by immigrants. And this was immediately reflected in the retail landscape. And so there are the shopping streets in that neighborhoods, and the shopping streets provide the what's called the bread and butter stores. So it's the mini supermarkets, butchers, bakeries, maybe a travel agent. In the old days, a wallpaper shop, and so on and so forth. And gradually, these shops were filled by immigrant entrepreneurs, and they catered to the immigrant communities that emerged in those neighborhoods. What you see today is something different. You see again demographic changes. You see again that new people gravitate to the city to work in the creative industries. These people tend to be highly educated, and they contribute to the gentrification of the area. This is partly induced by governmental policy. The government is in the process of reducing the social housing sector. So, let's say in the eastern part of Amsterdam, there's a neighborhood called the Leibniz-Institut. In that neighborhood, 95% of the houses, the social houses, now it's just 60. So a substantial part was refurbished and then sold on the private market. €250,000 per apartment. And this process is also reflected in the retail landscape. And so what we see is that these type of haberdashery stores, or the butchers, or mini supermarkets, or fun shops, are being replaced by these kind of things. So cappuccino bars, bookstores, design lighting stores, hip restaurants, and so on and so forth. But what is important is that this, but you can argue, well, this is just a change in the life of a neighborhood. The neighborhoods are always dynamic, they're never the same. New people come in, a new economy emerges, and so on and so forth. But it's important to be aware that this is not just a natural thing. It's as I already alluded to, it's steered by the government, so the regulatory forces are moving and shaping this. There are street managers, there are subsidy schemes, and there are all sorts of ways to promote the settlement of these type of businesses at the cost of the others. And at the same time, other shops are discouraged to stay in the neighborhood. And this has a profound effect on the entrepreneurial opportunities of immigrants. Let me give you a few examples. The picture may not be very sharp, but this is one of those new places. They sell jeans and all this kind of gear. It's very expensive. It's clear that this business targets the newcomers in the neighborhood, the middle class people, and to be sure, middle class in Amsterdam to a large extent means native white Dutch. There are not many immigrants involved in it, so the gentrification also boils down to the dilution of ethnic diversity. But this guy, who was supported by the city, they provided subsidies for the refurbishment of the place. They think it's good because now it contributes to the revitalization of the neighborhood. And the owner, he called his place DIV, D-I-V, DIV, which, as he explained, is an acronym of diversity. And he really sees himself as somebody who brings diversity into the city, which is a very funny idea, but anyway, that's what he's thinking. And he's not the only one. I mean, the deputy mayor was also there when we visited the place. She was very proud. Does this mean that there is no place for immigrants at all? No, it doesn't mean that. Because there is the government, the city government pays a lip service to ethnic diversity. Here is a picture of a cappuccino bar owned and managed by a guy from Morocco. And he is seen, his business is seen as a good contribution to the new retail landscape. It's good because the product that he offers and the style of it is offered is seen as fitting the new hip landscape. But when he tried to establish his firm, I'm almost done. When he tried to establish the firm, he called the municipality because he was interested in profiting from the subsidies, and he explained who he was, and they said, no, we're not interested. And he was a bit puzzled, and then later he called again and said, no, we're not interested. And then he asked his wife, who is native Dutch, to make that call. And she explained the same story. He said, oh, that's interesting, why don't you stop by? So apparently the civil servants, they heard his accent, oh, this is a Moroccan coffee shop or tea house. We don't want that, we only want sort of better kind of places. And then his wife introduced himself. It was sort of taken for granted that she would understand what was a need. Okay, I skipped that because I skipped that too. And I'm an entrepreneur myself, so I want to do a bit of my own marketing. No, so what is important, I think, and that is my last comment, is that the new economies that are emerging in cities like Amsterdam, but also in Berlin and in Frankfurt, Istanbul, in some places, Shanghai, offers opportunities. But the opportunities, as I see it in Amsterdam, are sort of funneled only to those immigrants who play the game. And playing the game means in this case that they are willing and also are able to articulate that in an explicit way, to contribute to the development of the cool landscapes. If they're not able to do that, they are automatically out-defined. And they are seen as delivering not the right quality, although nobody understands how to understand quality. Or they are seen as people who would undermine the revitalization of the city. These are my 2 cents. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.